conflict resolution skills are skills, which means that you have to kind of learn them. You have to continue to refine them. And the people who make it look amazing, seamless, effortless, practice a lot.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. I am your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a fantastic one. Our guest is the president of Conflict Management Strategies and is a workplace conflict expert. Carol Bowser, welcome to the show.
So pleased to be here.
It's wonderful to have you. And conflict management, I mean, my goodness, we don't need any of that, right? Today, right?
Yeah, because it's such a natural skill. Everyone's born with it that,
it's no conflict. That's right. No. We're all just happy, getting along. It's all good stuff. Seriously, though, an important topic. I'm excited about it. And before we get into it and get into your wisdom and expertise, please share a little bit about your career journey leading up to this point.
Well, I am a former employment lawyer who got into conflict resolution even before law school because I was interested in this thing called mediation, where people were actively involved in kind of solving their own problems, but with the help of someone who had a system, a process, and tools. And I felt it was much more empowering. And also, the more I learned about mediation processes, I found out that not only is it a process where people can have a voice in the resolution, but also have a voice in talking about what's important to them. And then also, if they were an active participant in that process, they were much more likely to follow through. And I don't know about your guests, but I mean, don't we have a great intentions? We have a plan, but maybe our follow through is lacking. And if we don't have that follow through, then maybe we just dampen something, but don't actually make a substantive change. So I did mediation training. I practiced law, and I found out that probably wasn't a really good fit. You know, we talk about having, certain knowledge and talent and interest. And I found that listening to people's stories and asking, how can I help and still make them feel empowered? And the idea of, training was just really great to me. So a couple decades ago, I made a switch and kind of started what eventually became conflict management strategies.
Wow. That's an interesting story. Now, looking back to those 20 years and that change that you made, what has that journey been like over 20 years of working inside of conflict management?
Well, I think like any kind of business owners, you sort of have kind of pillars of your business, pillars of revenue. So there's kind of two different answers to that question. Like, what have I done differently and kind of what have I learned? What's changed about conflict resolution? And then there's the business aspect of it, of what you think you go into business about, maybe different than what actually is revenue earning, how you feel valued, what you like to do. And I've got a sign in my office that my assistant gave to me recently, and it said, "It is my circus. These are my monkeys." And the idea of, what kind of control, what kind of life do you want to have? What brings you joy? What is challenging for you? What you find rewarding? And also, what's going to pay the rent? And that's always constantly evolving. Going toward the conflict resolution, I always just find that, it's kind of same, but different. Conflict resolution skills are skills, which means that you have to kind of learn them. You have to continue to refine them. And the people who make it look amazing, seamless, effortless, practice a lot. Any professional athlete, they have a mastery of the basics and they have situational awareness. And they look around and say, how is the profession, how is the sport evolving? And so they're kind of looking forward, looking back, and looking internally. And so increasing people's competence and their confidence in having conversations and moving through conversations and learning a little bit more about brain science and psychology and what people are concerned about in the world. All of those things are continually developing. So maybe 7 years ago, we wouldn't have been having conversations about conflict on virtual teams and how to manage that and how to recognize it. And it's just constantly evolving. Maybe in another couple of years, we'll be talking about how is artificial intelligence impacting how people address or don't address conflict. Maybe we've got an app that says all the right things for us, but we're still dealing with internal turmoil about, conversations that happen or don't happen. And maybe we don't feel heard because I don't know about your listeners, but I look at things on LinkedIn and it says this is an AI generated article. And I realize that they're giving a lot of kind of really high level platitudes, but not really helping people process it or develop a plan. Lots of hints and no real kind of how-tos.
We'll get back to the interview right after this word from our sponsor. Get ready to fast forward your bookkeeping business into the future with the Successful Bookkeeper Technology Showcase on June 22nd, 2023. This one-day virtual event is the perfect opportunity to connect with industry experts, leading technology providers, and find solutions and efficiencies for your business. But that's not all. Our keynote presenter, Teresa Slack, co-founder of Financially, will share the technology stack that has helped them build a near seven-figure bookkeeping business. You'll learn about the latest and greatest apps, software, and features that can take your business to the next level. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to revolutionize your bookkeeping business. Register today at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com/showcase and join us on June 22nd. See you there. Thank you for hearing from our sponsor. Now let's get back to the interview. Yeah, with so much content out there and, is it really going in and helping someone actually solve the problem? Because you could, heap tons of information onto solving a problem, but not necessarily solve any problem at all. It's interesting now, how do clients end up working with you? What is it, something where they're, wow, we got a lot of conflict here. Nobody knows how to deal with it. Let's bring someone like yourself in to talk about it, or we've read your book. I'm curious how that ends up, that you have clients that need help, and what type of work you do with them.
So there's a couple of different pathways. One, people will say, oh my gosh, we have what I refer to as a presenting incident. Something happened and they realize that they need help. And it might be that they say, well, Carol, I feel like having an outsider come in is going to give credibility because I've said this multiple different times. Or it might be like, well, I'm kind of viewed as part of the issue. So me coming in and trying to address it wouldn't be helpful. So Carol, we want to bring you in. Then there's also, hey, there are just skill sets that we want to have, that we are interested in retention, we're interested in engagement, we're interested in developing, because, it might be that people went into bookkeeping because they had a knack for numbers and liked it. And then they decide to grow a business. And now we're growing a business and we're managing people and we're having to develop and maintain client relationships and vendor relationships. So even though it's conflict skills, it's still communication skills. And then sometimes I've got folks who are closely trusted advisors, maybe the bookkeeper's bookkeeper or the attorney, or maybe you have outsourced HR functions and you're reaching out to an HR consultant, or maybe with your employee assistance provider. And they're saying, hey, we've got this issue, we need help. And so that's how people kind of finding their way. And also they sign up for the conflict tip of the day that I put out, or follow me on LinkedIn, because I'm one of the top 30 people to follow on LinkedIn for conflict resolution. Some person put me on that list a little bit ago. Thank you very much. So it's the people who are interested in becoming more conflict competent. And sometimes it's business owners who say, I need my people to work better together, and they're not. And I need them to be able to increase those skills so that way there's less organizational drag. So please come in and help us figure out how to be able to recognize the obstacles that are there and help us develop skill sets so that way there's less organizational drag. And I'm not spending my leadership time diving down and addressing these messy personal issues. I'm then working on strategy or client development or some of the succession planning or some of the things that really the senior leadership or the owner you should be doing, and not kind of diving down too much into the weeds.
Yeah, absolutely. I would imagine, I know for myself, like conflicts and that sort of energy, it's such a burn on so many parts of a human being's energy and mindset and productivity. And if we're not working well together, there's a drain on our creativity, there's a drain on productivity from the team's perspective. So, it can seem even just a light problem, but the impact of that problem on the business, can be massive. Even if it doesn't seem like that big a problem, it's likely causing a lot of costs. I'm curious if I said that we've got bookkeeping business owners listening right now. They've got maybe one staff or 2-3 staff in their business. They've been in business for a couple of years. If you were going to be, what would you predict would be some of the challenges or things that they're maybe not doing right? And what they might be able to do with it. Like, what comes up mostly when you're working with a business of that nature?
So for smaller businesses, they feel the pain of conflict a lot more acutely because it's not like you cannot talk. Well, maybe you could not talk to that person. However, it is creating a much more substantial drag. And also, if people end up disengaging or leaving because they expect you as the owner to be able to quote unquote handle it or hold people accountable, that they're going to lose confidence in you. And then they leave. And then all of a sudden, if it's 2 or 3 people, you could be losing 30% of your workforce. And imagine what the impact then is on the clients and also the growth of the business, because who's picking up the slack? Well, you are, as chief cook and bottle washer. If stuff isn't getting done, then it's taking time away from your family. And then I hear this kind of cycle of, we're spending so much time doing this that we're falling behind. So I'm spending more time picking it up. And then it becomes a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then you're doing more work and you can't get out of it. So you can't hire somebody new, or you can't train somebody new, or you can't onboard somebody new. And it is just really difficult. And you may have it set up, as I think a lot of firms are doing now, is kind of going more virtually. So you may have people who actually never talk to each other, and they still may be annoyed with each other because they may have very, very different expectations of how we do things here, and how they should be recognized, how they should be noticed, and how they should, or maybe how they feel they shouldn't need to be managed. So those are some things, and it all kind of comes back to, it is your circus, it is your monkeys. And so even as the owner, what are your attitudes about conflict, or what people should be doing or shouldn't be doing, or what's the way you want it done? And sometimes those expectations and assumptions can end up kind of creating conflict, because maybe you're hiring great bookkeepers, and maybe they're not great at voicing what their concerns are, and maybe they're not great at giving you feedback. Maybe you're not great at hearing the feedback, or maybe you're not great at setting good boundaries. So,
yeah. I would say all of those ring true. I mean, the conversations that I've had, and actually recently a conversation about a very specific situation that caused some conflict for one of the bookkeepers that I was speaking with. A person comes into the office, typically 10 to 5, let's say. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, the person comes in at 9 o'clock, which then disrupts the other people in the office around, using space or whatever the case may be. And the perception is that this other person that came in at 9 doesn't care about what anybody else thinks or wants, just does it the way that they want it. It's almost like a brand of being like a selfish person that doesn't care about each other, doesn't listen to instructions. And then the owner's experience is like frustration and almost like, I just want to get rid of this person, right? Because,
oh my gosh.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's like this is like, hit the repeat button. It's like, I'm sure you've heard this story a million times.
Yeah. Michael, I am so glad you brought up that example. I tend to think in like kind of what universal themes are present. And I know that every conflict, every disappointment, every frustration is super idiosyncratic because it's how it impacts you and how it impacts the other person and to what extent. And when one of the things that I think about that happens in the workplace a lot, particularly, I think in small businesses where we really need people to be fairly autonomous, really kind of proficient. And I'll hear this a lot, like I don't want to do hand holding. Because I'd be willing to bet that a lot of people who go into business for themselves, they really value autonomy. And they really like being able to set up their parameters. Maybe they just, it's odd because I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't necessarily like structure. But then in the bookkeeping, you guys it is about structure. It is about process. And it's about starting at the top and getting down to the bottom and having it work with very little error or variation. And so when I was hearing that example, it's like, well, I wonder how much that person felt as though they had the autonomy to be able to do that. And other people are saying, well, you know what, we actually had a rhythm, we had a process, and you're kind of disrupting it. And, kind of get out of my space and get back into your lane. And so it's along the lines of that there might have been different expectations about culture and autonomy. And if someone switched, they likely didn't realize or recognize that there was a pattern, a habit, or a ritual around how other people got their work done and felt successful. And so what I'm hearing is somebody felt as though there was autonomy to change. They probably didn't need to get permission. However, they maybe weren't recognizing the ritual, the things that were kind of obvious for how other people were getting the work done in that space. And rather than saying, hey, you're disrupting this ritual and we need to figure out, is that okay or is that not okay? And how much warning was happening. So people say, hey, we've developed an entire ritual over the last year and a half, 9 months, 2 months, whatever it is, that this is how the workflow gets done in this space. And then you kind of come in, which it may not have been intentional, but has disrupted what the workflow is. And whether or not that's my personal workflow that I'm feeling territorial about it, and I feel intruded upon, or that you should have asked me permission, or we should have had a conversation ahead of time about that. The other person might just say, hey, I'm autonomous, I'm getting it done. And the fact if I come in and say hello, that's just common courtesy and you're getting all upset at me. So I view it as like, okay, autonomy, and was there an awareness that there was a ritual or a way that someone felt successful at work to get the work done? And that there's a possibility for a conversation around that. So yeah, the idea of autonomy is really kind of huge, particularly in small business. When business owners, you want to hire people who are quote unquote self-starters, which means they're not sitting around waiting for direction. They can identify what the needs are, what the pile is, and work through it without having to ask permission. So
that's a good point.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting one because the autonomy can show up all over the place, right? We want to hire people that can figure it out because in a small business, there's often, a lot of lateral things that need to be figured out. Your job is this, but it's also this, and that too, right? But then all of a sudden they start going lateral and they're doing it their way. And it's like, wait a second, I want you to do it this way. Well, so it's like, wanting your cake and wanting to eat. I don't know, I always mess up these things. You want to have your cake and eat other people's cake too. I don't know. But it's that autonomy can both be the double-edged sword. It's like, yes, we want people to think for themselves, be autonomous, but then we need people to do the way we want it to do. So breakdown of communication. And also this, what I hear too is, and in this situation is, if you get frustrated with somebody, you can almost sort of go, well, there's no fixing it. And it's like, this person's broken or the situation's broken. I just want to I want to delete. I want to cancel the problem by getting rid of the person versus, hey, you know what? The next person that comes might have the same kind of autonomous dreams, wishes, desires, and behaviors. And so where is the real problem in this scenario? Often it sits with us, right?
Yeah. So you bring up a couple of really good points of, I find that when people hire, and someone asked me this question one time, the way they phrased it, it's like, well, would you rather hire someone who you need to rein in or someone who you have to push? And most people would say, I kind of prefer someone to have to rein in. However, that also means there might be a lot more lateral movement, and they might be creating, hey, back in your area, out of my lane. And then also as a business owner, they may be doing things that aren't helpful, that they're kind of creating their way of doing it as the system. And I've often said there's a danger of people who are treating preference as gospel, meaning, there are standard accounting procedures, but everybody may have a little bit of a tweak of how they get their work done. But if they're teaching their tweak as the way to do it, and people have other ways of doing it, that can create a difficulty. And as the owner, you get to be able to say, this is how we do it here. And this is kind of the range where you have freedom and autonomy. But if you're butting up or crossing over, this is where, do I want to be consulted? Do I want to be informed? And then also, how is it that your way of doing it may be impacting how other people do their job? I don't know. It depends on how people run their business. We've got some people who say, these are your clients, you run it through. Are there other people who say, no, this is the type of work you're doing? And you're doing only this for this type of work for these clients, or are we doing something different? It's a great answer. It just sort of depends, but being able to have a critical look of how much, as the business grows, it's going to need to be more systematized and more predictable, and not everything can live in one person or the owner's head. So if they don't know where those lines are for you, that can create difficulty, because then you're appearing consistently inconsistent, and people don't know how to be successful, and that can cause a lot of frustration and resentment, directed at you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said something that made a lot of sense to me as well, in that the business owner goes into business because they want freedom, they want autonomy, and also they may have done the solo thing for a while in order to get the airplane in the air, and they're really good at that. And then all of a sudden now they got to bring other people into the airplane, and it's like they want people to do the things their way, and it's like they may have lost some of those. I mean, lost them, but their skills have maybe muted a little bit around being able to work with people, communicate to people, and give instructions to people. Example for myself was, I remember I had this really small business when I was in university, and I often did it myself, right? And worked on my own, and then I had hired some people to help, and like my instructions were in my head. And I remember one example where the person was like, I'm like, why didn't you get the rake? And it's like, well, you didn't ask me to get the rake. It's like, right. Because in my head, I'm like, you should be getting the rake right now, but I'm not voicing that, because it's just so natural for me that someone would notice that I need a rake here. And so that, I think, causes challenges for the business owner in business when they're bringing people on, is maybe they need to look at themselves and say, hey, am I really good or can I be better perhaps at communicating working with people, giving people, better expectations, and making sure that they know what I want them to do, how I want them to do it, and let them know when they've done a good job of it.
Absolutely. It's always tricky about how much our systems live in our head, and especially with small business, you're busy doing the work, and then it comes to like, well, do you want to be an owner operator? I mean, do you still want to continue doing the bookkeeping work, or do you want to own a business? Because they may be very, very different. One is very tactical, facing on getting what's done in front of you. And then the other is, how am I building a book of business? How am I doing the marketing? How am I doing the client relationships? How am I building the infrastructure of the business? And some people want different things. And some people, maybe you decided that you wanted a bookkeeping business because you didn't want to do bookkeeping anymore, and you wanted something to be able to support you. But then also, like, how much did you want to be a leader and manage people? Because whether you've got independent contractors or employees, you still have to manage people. You have to manage the relationships, and just being able to kind of be clear on how much you want to be involved, it would be helpful. And if that's not a great skill set of yours, maybe it should be, or maybe you're just delegating absolutely everything and you're not interested in that. And people may have different expectations of you. They may want mentorship. They may want more professional development. They may want one-on-ones. They may want like more systems and processes and things like that. So I always think about being clear on defining expectations and also standard operating procedures. So that way it doesn't live in your head and people know how to be successful at work.
Solve a problem with the system. So now we've kind of talked a lot about the problem, and some of the solutions perhaps, and a lot of it is communication so far that we've talked about. Do you have a way that you recommend, like, let's use the example of this owner was frustrated. Is there, this is a problem. Maybe that they don't want to deal with it. They'd rather just, have the person no longer work for them. But then to deal with that problem what's the approach? Is it like, hey, let's sit down for a conversation, or let's all meet as a team? What do you recommend to start tackling these things? Is it look at me first? What can I do as a leader first to assess for myself? Is there any guidance you can give around that person going and actually tackling this?
So I'm going to come at it from a couple of different aspects. One is, if you have to give feedback that somebody isn't performing, that should be done one-on-one, and being able to say, I like to talk in the terms of, kind of assumptions and expectations. And it's saying, hey, when I gave you this task or we brought you in, I assumed that it would be maybe this quality, this quantity, this timing, or that I made the assumption that you would pick up this process. And if and my assumption could be wrong. So let's kind of go back and talk about the process. And I'll put a little asterisk here, because it may be that people say, hey, Carol, we're doing great. We've got the system, we got the process. However, the people just aren't getting along. So we can then take it to a different conversation about saying, help me understand how you may be feeling a little bit impeded, or where you're feeling frustrated in these interactions. And I view it as, most people will have conflict or tension or frustration because in some way, shape, or form, they feel like the other person is impeding them from being fully successful. And so let's just kind of talk about, hey, this is going on. And if you could say, is it a system? Is it a process? Is it an assumption? Is it an interaction that you're wanting them to talk to you beforehand? What is it? And really just kind of talking about what their expectations were of how they thought it should be done. So it could be a system, it could be a process thing, but being able to talk about how they may be feeling impeded in their, in their success, and just spend some time a little bit talking about it. Then I see one thing that managers and leaders do that I think is wrong. And that's a big statement. I think it's wrong, because they would say, well, they're adults, they should just figure it out. Well, you think if they would have found a way that was successful for them, that they would have done it already. And they may be looking to you saying, I have felt as though either this is your role to be able to step in and address this, or this is your role to make a decision of how you want it done, because we're just arguing about how it needs to get done. And each of our points is valid. So as the owner or as the leader, sometimes you do need to step in and say, I think this is a leadership decision because you have tried to be able to address it and it hasn't been successful. So there's, again, kind of talking about stepping into the leadership role. Going back even further, have you been really articulate in saying, these are the expectations. This is how I want it done. These are the guidelines for how we do it here. And if you are seeing people get tripped up, say, let's go back and have this guideline conversation, because different people may have believe that they're following the principle of the guidelines, but how they actually do it may be vastly different and maybe escalating the conflict. So for example, if someone says, well, this is how I do it, and the other person says, well, this is how I do it, but they're each aggravating each other more than addressing the situation, then that's an area where the owner or the leader or your office manager says, you know what, both of these ways have value. Both of these have merit. Both of you had said that your way helps you feel successful, but this is how I want it done here. It's a little bit more of that we want autonomy and we want people to bring their brain power to work. However, if you have multiple different people doing it, then you just have a hodgepodge of things and there's no real way to answer the question, this is how we do it here. So being able to recognize that you do need to step in to be able to establish the guidelines. And when people can't address it themselves, just say, they may not be abdicating. There may be an expectation or assumption that in part it's your role to hold other people accountable, because that's what people want. They want other people to be held accountable, and they don't. And if they feel as though you're not doing it, then you're kind of compelling them to sit in points of pain and discomfort.
So interesting. So many ways to approach it and think about it, and such a valuable thing to spend time solving. Because as we talked about in the beginning, the energy that goes into it when it's not going well and not dealing with it, the lingering energy and drain on energy for all involved is so great. And so I really love this conversation. I'd love to hear a little bit about, if people wanted more information, you did mention you have the tip of the week, which is exciting. I'd love for our listener to get the tip of the week, but as well, if there's other ways that they can educate themselves from some of your knowledge or learn more about you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Great. Well, I regularly post on LinkedIn, and so you can connect with me there. But I also want to provide kind of different content. So I put up blogs and videos on my website, managingconflict.com. And if you're interested in getting that conflict, it's not just weekly, it's daily, Monday through Friday. Wow. Head to managingconflict.com and find the click for conflict tip of the day. And just know that I regularly present at conferences and business meetings. So, keep a lookout. I might be coming to a conference near you. And if people are looking for speakers or coaches and stuff, reach out, because I love being able to do this. It's a little bit like, don't keep me a secret. And if you are learning new tips, trying on new things, saying, hey, I want to spend some time talking about some assumptions or some unmet expectations, don't keep it a secret. Don't make your efforts and the skills and the tools that you're using to create better employee experiences and better customer experiences a secret. It's important stuff. And that way it doesn't all have to rest on you. You've got other people using those tools, and hopefully other people recognizing that someone's trying to use the tools to have an important conversation.
I love that. And as you were speaking there, bookkeepers, our listener, right now, they work with small business owners, and these small business owners have a whole host of their own problems as well. We're our listener helping them fix one of the most important piece, which is the finances. But because our listener has such a direct and intimate relationship, I would say, with the business owner, they know of many other problems that business owners are dealing with. So listener, I encourage you, if you're listening to content like this from Carol and you're getting Carol's tips and you're learning how to deal with conflict, forward that information to your clients and let them know, hey, this might be something I know everyone deals with conflict. Here's something. That's just a dynamite way for you to be valuable to your customers and your clients with information that I guarantee you would be valuable to them. And so this is, Carol, thank you for being such a great guest and bringing this wonderful topic to us, because it's more than just helping our listener. I think this is helping our listener help others. And they're in a position to do that with some of this information. So I encourage you all to get to Carol's website, get those tips, start incorporating it into your life, your business. But then, as Carol says, share it. Don't keep it a secret. Your secret, sauce of making your business a better workplace. Carol, this has been fantastic. I want to thank you for your generosity, coming on the show, sharing your wisdom and expertise, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
It's been a pleasure to be here.
Well, the pleasure has been all ours. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.